This is another episode in my series on a Christian's response to the emotions that come along with coronavirus. So, how do we as Christians handle sadness and grief? I know that for myself, while I haven't experienced the outcomes that make me sad, I've experienced some sadness just sort of looking at the potential outcomes that I think are plausible. It feels a little bit like somebody you love who's really close to you has just been diagnosed with cancer, some kind of really aggressive, stage 4 cancer, and they only have 2 months to live. And you're already sad, even though you haven't lost them yet. In a way, they're still the same person that they were yesterday, but now you know they have cancer. And so you're just like gripped with the thing that's coming down the road. And that's how I've been feeling. It's been a very surreal feeling. It's like the world that I have lived in, the society that I have grown up in, the social order and the surroundings that I have known, is all I've ever known, has cancer, has just been diagnosed with COVID-19, and I don't know if it's going to make it out alive. And there's a certain amount of sadness with that. There's a certain amount of sadness knowing that my husband is one of the people who is, running a higher risk factor for having a severe illness if he catches this. So the sadness of just, he doesn't have it, but what if he gets it? And then I'm going to be really sad. And so it's almost like I'm previewing that sadness, even though I don't even know what that's going to taste like if I walk through that grief. I haven't walked through a lot of grief in my life. I've walked through a very small, 2 of my grandparents have died. That's about it. And one of them died when I was 6, so I barely was old enough to really appreciate and understand what that grief was. And one of them died a few years ago, and I was able to be there, and I was deeply sad, but I don't feel like I've been wrecked by grief ever. I feel like this has the potential to knock a lot of people down. I read a beautifully written journal from a Chinese woman, and she just was writing a day-by-day journal, and in 20 days she lost both her father and her mother from coronavirus. I mean, it was translated into English. So I was just reading the translation, which wasn't even her words, her original words, but it was just so sad. She was just grieving, and you just get so choked up when you know that somebody else is grieving. So already thousands and thousands of people are in this grief. They are already sad. They've already lost a loved one. And as this continues to spread, who knows how many other people will also lose someone that they love that they never expected to lose this soon. Well, how do we as believers handle the grief that we either know that we're going to face or are already feeling? This is obviously just scratching the surface, because grief is a lifelong process, and like I said, I don't even know the depths of grief yet. So this is just a few of the verses that I've put together on this. First of all, I just want to acknowledge that grief has a place in the believer's life. Grief is not like fear, which I talked about, where it's just like fear is from the enemy. You don't have to stand for it. You can get the grace of God, and you can just walk through this life with peace. Well, grief actually does have a place. It's legitimate to be sad. It's legitimate for a believer to cry. It's legitimate for a believer to be mourning. The Ecclesiastes verse says, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance. It also says, rejoice with them that do rejoice, and weep with them that weep. It doesn't say, rejoice with them that do rejoice and cheer up those who weep. It says, weep with them. It's okay to weep, and it's okay to weep with someone. And weeping with them acknowledges that their sorrow is legitimate. And so as we know people who maybe are weeping, as believers, let's weep with them. let's have that compassionate empathy. Let's be there for each other. Let's not act like so many people in this culture act, where they're like, well, I don't really know how to do grief because I don't know what to say, and this is really awkward, so I'll just sort of step away from that person and leave them alone for a while. Let's try to be there for each other. Let's just try to be present. Let's just try to be real and authentic. In James, it says, is any among you afflicted? Let him pray. Is any merry? Let him sing psalms. In other words, again, there's this contrast. Some people are merry, and let them go ahead and sing. But for the afflicted, it doesn't say they should just, put a cheesy little smile on their face and pretend like they're not. No, but it says let him pray. And as we are afflicted, as we are sorrowful, prayer is available to us. And prayer is a very legitimate response of the soul. Even prayer that is a lament of our soul. Jeremiah said, oh, that my head were waters, and mine eyes a fountain of tears, that I might weep day and night for the slain of the daughter of my people. This was a godly man. This was a prophet of God. And we call Jeremiah the weeping prophet, but he wasn't the only one who wept. Jeremiah also said, for these things I weep. Mine eye runneth down with water, because the comforter that should relieve my soul is far from me. My children are desolate, because the enemy prevailed. This is just acknowledging the deep sadness and grief that a believer can walk through. It's not something that we have to cover up and put a little smiley face sticker over our face to pretend like we're good when we're not. Grief is a legitimate thing, and I think all of these verses let us know that that's the case. Here's an example from Psalm 6. I am weary with my groaning. All the night I make my bed to swim. I water my couch with my tears. Mine eye is consumed because of grief. It waxeth old because of all mine enemies. Depart from me, all ye workers of iniquity, for the Lord hath heard the voice of my weeping. The Lord hath heard my supplication. The Lord will receive my prayer. Psalm 6 is just a short psalm, but it just explores somebody who's walking through that depth of grief. And then that person turns to faith and says, you know what? The Lord hears this. The Lord knows that I'm weeping. The Lord will receive my prayer. And so even if your prayer is a lament, even if your prayer is just pouring out your sorrow to God, that's okay. A prayer of lament that turns to a prayer of faith and says, even though my heart has just been ripped out, my God is faithful, my God is enough, my God will hear, He has heard, He will receive my prayer. That is a godly response and a healthy response by a believer. Loss is the reason why grief hurts so much. Because when there's something that we treasure and we lose it, it hurts. And the Bible gives us a lot of insight into how to handle that when that loss happens and it hurts. First of all, the Lord points us to where our treasure is. So if something that we treasure is here on earth, then we are going to be susceptible to losing it. The only thing that we cannot possibly lose is God. So I would just encourage you to right now, especially if it's before you have experienced the depths of grief, anchor your soul in God so that you know, beyond a shadow of a doubt, unshakably know that God, who can never be taken away from you, is your soul's choicest treasure. Jesus says, lay not up for yourselves treasures upon earth, where moth and rust doth corrupt, and where thieves break through and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust doth corrupt, and where thieves do not break through nor steal. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. We think of this as possessions. We think of this as, well, my treasure shouldn't be my money. My treasure shouldn't be my stuff. But this can apply to everything that you have. It's not that you don't treasure your children, but you relinquish them to God as His business, how long you are entrusted those children. It's not that you don't treasure your spouse. I will be devastated if my husband dies. I mean, I think he's going to die before I do, just because he's older than me. Life is uncertain. You never know what, you know. You never know. No, tomorrow is not promised to us. The next breath is not promised to us. But whether it's sooner than I thought or later than I thought, it's going to hurt to lose the people that we love. But can we root ourselves in God so deeply that even those people who are wrapped around our hearts so inextricably are not going to rock our foundation when we lose them, because we still have God? God says, I will never leave thee, nor forsake thee, so that we may boldly say, the Lord is my helper, and I will not fear what man shall do unto me. The Lord is permanent. Heaven is permanent. Everything on this earth is temporary. And we like to get confused about that and lose sight of that and forget that and act as if we're always going to have the life that we have, we're always going to have the people around us that we have, we're always going to have the things that we like, that we've built up around us. No, it's all temporary. And so in the preparation to face sadness, I know for my own soul, I am acknowledging that these things are temporary, that I can lose them at any time, regardless of whether there's a coronavirus in the world or not. I can lose them at any time. And God is my soul's delight. God is my soul's chief treasure. And God can never be taken away from me. I can never be taken away from Him by any works of man on this earth. That's secure. I cannot lose that. At the same time, when I do lose things that I love here, it's okay to grieve their loss, especially the people. One more verse on this theme. For ye had compassion of me in my bonds, and took joyfully the spoiling of your goods, knowing in yourselves that ye have in heaven a better and an enduring substance. Hebrews 10:34. Wow. Those believers took joyfully the spoiling of their goods. How did they do that? You know, how would you feel if you had maybe stored up 3 months worth of food for your family, and you felt like you were going to be good to go for however long the quarantine was, and then some group of thugs went door to door in your neighborhood and they took everything from every house? Whoa. Like, could you take that joyfully? Could I take that joyfully? Boy, that's a high calling, because your very survival is at stake. But the key, what they knew, was that they had in heaven a better and an enduring substance. So I think that there's a hint here for us, is to fix our eyes on what we have in heaven and know that that is enduring and it's better than what we have here, and anything that we lose here and any suffering that we can go through here is not worthy to be compared with the glory that shall be revealed in us. When we grieve, we have a great source of comfort. Jesus said, blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. Matthew 5:4. I always used to hate this beatitude, because I was like, Jesus, what in the world? Why would that be blessed? Like, wouldn't it be better to not ever mourn in the first place? Like, what? Like, why is it blessed to mourn and then be comforted? I would rather opt out of that completely. Thank you very much. I don't think that's very blessed. I certainly don't think it's happy. So this is a spiritual truth that Jesus is revealing to us, and it's very counterintuitive. It's certainly not anything like what we would come up with ourselves. I still haven't completely gotten an understanding of why this is so much more blessed to mourn and then be comforted than to never have mourned at all. But it's interesting when you look at the Greek, the word that they shall be comforted is paraclete. It's like they shall be paracleted. And the paraclete is what? It's the Holy Spirit. So this verse where Jesus says, blessed are they that mourn, it's almost like you could put in there, they're going to get the Holy Spirit. And yes, the Holy Spirit is worth having, and better to have that than not to have mourned in the first place, if that's the path to getting that level of attention from the Holy Spirit. So as we go forward into our grief, and potential grief or already grief, are we looking to the Holy Spirit and saying, Lord, you are the comforter. Holy Spirit, you have been sent, and specifically as our comforter. So Lord, you are my comforter. And I'm asking you to come and minister your comfort to my heart in a way that I will know that it's more blessed for me to have mourned and been comforted than to have never mourned at all. I'm trusting you that that is a reality, and I'm asking you to bring that reality to pass in my life. Again, it's a walk of faith. Again, it's prayer. Again, it's confident expectation in God that he is who he says he is. Jesus gives a very interesting juxtaposition that's similar to the Matthew 5 passage, but he contrasts it. He says, "Blessed are ye that hunger now, for ye shall be filled. Blessed are ye that weep now, for ye shall laugh." And then just a couple verses later, he says, "Woe unto you that are full, for ye shall hunger. Woe unto you that laugh now, for ye shall mourn and weep." This again is the revelation of truth from Jesus himself. And right now, I'm sort of in that, I don't get it, but I'm gonna acknowledge that you tell the truth, Lord. So whether or not I understand this particular thing, like, wow, blessed are ye that hunger now, for ye shall be filled. There's been so many believers throughout history who have hungered. People in prison for their faith. That's not going to feel blessed if it happens to me. It's going to feel like this is miserable. I want to go back to, 2019. Thank you very much. Blessed are ye that weep now, for ye shall laugh. But I think that it's, in a way, it's a contrast between, okay, we're here on this earth and we're hungry and we're weeping here on this earth, but we who are believers are going to be full and eating at the marriage supper of the Lamb and feasting with our beloved for eternity. We're going to laugh in heaven. And anybody who doesn't know Jesus, even if they're full, we can look at the people who are like all the elite rich people who probably have a nice bunker to hide out in for the duration of the coronavirus and then come out at the, once the world is reset. And it's easy to be like a little bit like, oh, wouldn't that be nice? Have a nice bunker and have millions of dollars just, ride out the storm. Well, yeah, but those people are full. If they don't know the Lord, they're full now, but they're going to hunger. They're laughing now, but they're going to mourn and weep. And yeah, when you put it like that, the trade-off is no brainer. No question. No comparison. Of course, I would rather hunger now for this little blip that's a vapor and then have laughter and being filled for all of eternity than to trade it and flip that the other way around. Duh. And so we can find comfort in that. We can find comfort in the fact that this is only a season. This is only temporary. And God does have something amazing in store for us when we die and be in his presence. Jesus said, "Verily, verily, I say unto you, that ye shall weep and lament, but the world shall rejoice. And ye shall be sorrowful, but your sorrow shall be turned into joy." This is in the context of what Jesus was telling his disciples right before his crucifixion, but I think that it can also be applied to the broader scope of our lives. Jesus doesn't say, you know what, since you're a believer, I'm going to protect you from ever weeping, you're never going to lament, and you're never going to be sorrowful. No, he's informing us ahead of time. You are going to weep. You are going to lament. You shall be sorrowful. But your sorrow will be turned to joy. And that's hard to hold on to in the midst of sorrow, but that's the exercise of faith. Do you hold on to that confident expectation in the Lord? Lord, you are good. Lord, you have something for me. Lord, you are going to turn this into joy. Lord, I do not see how it could possibly happen, but you are the God of the supernatural, and however you do this, I know that it's going to be that God works all things together for good to those who love God and to those who are called according to his purpose. So even this sorrow that I'm going through right now, I'm counting on you and know that this will be turned into joy. And Jesus also said 2 verses later, and ye now therefore have sorrow, but I will see you again, and your heart shall rejoice, and your joy no man taketh from you. In the middle of sorrow, it feels like nobody's going to ever take this sorrow from you, and you're never going to be glad again. But Jesus says, you're going to have joy, and you're never going to be sorry again. And that's our hope. That's our expectation. And when is that? It's when Jesus sees us again. When we see him, our heart will rejoice, and that joy no one will take from us. In 2 Corinthians 1:5, Paul says, for as the sufferings of Christ abound in us, so our consolation also aboundeth by Christ. Talk about somebody who suffered. Paul said the sufferings of Christ abounded in him. And if you read some of the lists of stonings and being let down by a basket in the wall and having 39 lashes and being shipwrecked and being this and that and the other thing, and just the persecution that he went through was intense. And Paul was able to confess, even in this lifetime, his consolation also abounded by Christ. He was able to say where God's grace was abundant to him in his weakness, that where his thorn in the flesh was a cause of difficulty and pain for him, the grace of God exceeded that. So even now in this life, we can expect to have a measure of the grace of God that is not only equivalent to, but that it exceeds the measure of our suffering. So that even when we are hurting, even when we are actively in pain, even when we are in the middle of the suffering, God is distributing to us his grace. God is ministering consolation. God, the Holy Spirit, is our comforter, and he is present with us. Do we know him? Do we enter his presence? Do we delight in him? Do we receive his comfort that is available to us? Do we believe that it's even there? Oh, what if we said to the Lord in the midst of our pain, Lord, this hurts so bad, but I just invite you to come and show me yourself. I just invite you to come and make known your comfort to my soul. I just invite you to just administer the dose of grace to me in this moment that exceeds the suffering that I'm going through. I invite you to show me what that is. I know that when I was in Haiti and I had malaria and I was in pain and I was just praying for healing, I remember being aware that it was a higher priority for God for me to grab a hold of his grace and learn how to be joyful. It was a higher priority for God for me to be refined in my suffering than for me to get out of my suffering. It was a higher priority for God for that refinement to take place than for the pain to stop. So I had to trust God in that. I had to trust God that his refining, since it was his higher priority, it was also my higher priority. So I received it from his hand and said, Lord, as long as you want this to be prolonged, I accept it from you. I also still am praying for your healing and restoration of my body so that I can be up and around and feel good again. And obviously he did do that. But in the meantime, I had to acknowledge the Lord is doing a work in me, and he doesn't waste anything. Suffering is never for nothing, which is the title of an Elizabeth Elliot book, which is very excellent. So the Lord is our comfort, and he is able to make that consolation abound, even now in this life. That's the end for today.